Welcome to another episode of Games in Slow and Bad. We're going to do something a little different today. We are going to assemble and review the Pip-Boy 2000 Build It Yourself kit that is available on ThinkGeek.com. I purchased this on Cyber Monday for an absolute screaming deal because eventually I'd like to have a full set of Fallout cosplay. Sort of a life goal there for me. As you can see, it comes in a fairly nice outer box. There's a sticky label on it. It's nothing overly special. And let's look at the side. So we have sort of all the notations. It's made by the Wand Company, so this is not made by Bethesda themselves. As such, it's probably not its own trash bag. It's based on Fallout 76, but don't let that turn you back. It is stunningly a nice product. So I just want to leave it there for anyone to read whatever they want to read, yada yada yada. Now, let us start to look at the product once we open the box, shall we? So, the box is a little difficult to open. I sort of jimmied it before we started this. And as you can see, once you open the box, you're greeted with more cardboard. This thing over-indexes in cardboard. And what you find is a rather nice little box that's very tightly stacked in the outer cardboard box, with a really pretty outer label on it. You can very clearly see the latches. Very nice product. Very nice presentation. So, here is the label for the Pip-Boy 2000 kit. It is very nice. The box itself is nice from a distance. It's solid. It's, clearly it's not going to delaminate. You can clearly see a few edges on it where it's sort of wrapped with this red material. So, that's not the best, but then again, I didn't buy it for the box. So again, really nice label on it, really nice latches. I like the handle quite a bit with the little Vault-Tec symbol. So, we then unlatch it, and we're treated to a huge kit with a very pretty interior display. I'm going to shine a flashlight in a few seconds on this so that we can better see all of the notes on here. Okay, so we are assembling the model of the future. Fun, easy. I would say that this didn't live up to that. So we're going to learn the principles of Robco's Pip-Boy construction, its mechanics, in an interesting and interactive way. Yep. So this is one of the highlights of this. The box is really stunning when you get inside of it. Our adventure begins. There's some annotation at the bottom, Robco Vault-Tec. It's really cute. The presentation of the parts is also pretty good. Everything is held in place with a huge amount of plastic. So once I sort of subjugate some of this material, we see we have a few decals. The screen decal, which I'm never going to use. Instructions to put it on. And just general decals that allow you a few options for your Geiger counter, your clock, your radio. It's some pretty cool stuff. We also have the construction manual, and here's where this sort of falls apart for me a little bit. It looks like an IKEA instruction manual. If I were assembling a Malm bed set, this is what I would expect, right? But I paid a lot of money for a really nice model. I think that they could have done something a little bit better than this. This is pretty amateur hour stuff right here. I wasn't thrilled. And throughout, we're going to see how freaking confusing these instructions can actually be. So, starting to dissect this kit, we have a bunch of larger pieces up front. So you can see this screen, and you can see a lot of the mechanisms that live to the right of the Pip-Boy screen. You can see the holotape mock-up that they provide, some really nice little tools, like a little branded Vault-Tec screwdriver set and a wrench, and then buttons and windows. All of this is going to be used during the construction, and it was incredibly satisfying to lift up this plastic. Incredibly satisfying. It was a very solid plastic tray as well. Definitely no stop. No stops. No stops here. They went all out. It's a very nice product. Now the tools are very usable. There's a flathead screwdriver, an appropriately sized wrench for the nuts that are in here, and a Phillips head. All of which you will actually use during construction. So it's very nice that they included them within this. And the first thing that you're going to find within this kit is your holotape. Your holotape is the easiest item to put together as it really only involves 2 screws, but removing it from the plastic was an absolute nightmare, as you're going to see me twist this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and it was a lot easier to lift up the plastic and access it that way. So as you can see, I had a really rough time getting it out of this plastic container, but it was okay. Once I lifted the plastic out, this got a lot easier. I'd recommend that you actually just take the whole plastic tray out, because you're going to want to look at the inside anyways. On the inside are more well-packaged items, including the holotape player, a labeled box of components, a padded cuff. Everything was well-labeled, well-wrapped, well-packaged. Kudos to the Wand Company for creating a really nice presentation when you open the product. You find the other side of the holotape down the bottom. After you've extracted them both, the first step within the directions is to combine them together to make the whole holotape. So side A has a screw hole, side B has a receptacle, and you can see within the instructions that you basically just have to nest them together and then screw them together using a handful of screws that are located within the box itself. It's worth noting that a lot of products have screws that are within the components box. Some of them use screws that they were using to hold them in place. Definitely look through the directions, which are not great, and size your screws using the directions in order to determine if you're using the right screw, because it will get frustrating if you have to back them out. As noted, there is this giant box of components, and I have to recommend that you go and get a baggie to dump them into, because when it says there are small components, it is not kidding. This thing has the tiniest, most ridiculous stuff. Example, this. This is critical to another component. Look at the size relative to the holotape. Look at it relative to this screwdriver. What? Come on now, guys. Put this into some sort of knockout card. Put it into something where I actually have a place to put it. This is ridiculous. There's also a wrapped thing of components here that was inside of the cuff. This contains your screws. So here is what the screws actually look like. They're labeled, and you can size them against the directions themselves to ensure you're using the right one. They actually scale appropriately to the picture that's displayed in the instructions. So when it shows a screw, just hold your screw up to the picture, like that one right there, and you should be able to tell if you're using the right type. They're also labeled, so once you get a sense going in of what you're supposed to do, this becomes pretty simple. The holotape isn't done once you screw it together, however. You also need to affix the tape guard, which just snaps in place. And you can see that in this step right here on step 6. It's nothing cute, it's nothing overly dramatic. You simply pop it onto the holotape itself, and I'll show you the finished product here in a sec. So, slide, 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 slide. Yay, we have a holotape. It's impressive. It's impressive. The 3 colors really come together to make an impressive little prop. Now, let's look at the directions again, and we see, oh my lord, what is it that you want me to do here? What on earth? Look at all these things that are nested together. Why do you want me to do this? Okay, so, no, you only need to do all of the disassembly if you want to affix the applique for the screen. It's already mostly assembled, with the exception of the back. The back is this piece right here, and as long as you're okay with the screen being black, which I was okay with, it is just nesting those 2 things together. Simple as that. I personally don't like the applique on the screen. I don't think I'll ever put it on, so I was happy to just do this. Now, referencing the next piece, we're starting work on the side components. We need to affix this gray piece and this black piece to this green piece in order to eventually have it tie into the cuff. We use 2 little screws for this, and everything's going well so far. The next thing is to complete the holotape player, which looks more dramatic than it is. but we're going to go through pretty slowly assembly so that hopefully by the end of it, you will feel pretty good about putting this monstrosity here together. Again, flat packed furniture. This is the most complex piece right here. Apologies for the video quality, but these little knobs are the most confusing piece of it. These are wire tiebacks that you'll use later, and I'm going to try and show you not only what they are, that's them right there, they live in the component box, but also how to appropriately put them in. It probably doesn't net matter to the end product because it's so hidden, but I will show you what it should look like according to the directions. So that right there is what it should look like. Got away from me. But if you look, the hoop should be towards the outer piece of it. So here you can also see us affixing the first step, attaching the hollow to the screen using one of these larger threaded rods with a bolt on it. Again, here's where that wrench comes into play. As you can see, it's really held in by two things, and then we have to get this next piece on. And the next piece just nests over it and is held in place by a screw. So if I have a complaint about this product, it is that it's reliant on a lot of pretty simplistic bolts, like that one right there, and screws like that one right there, to hold it together. And that makes me a smidgen nervous at times, because there's a lot of things going on here that are being held together. This is what yours should look like at this point. You can pause the video and take a look if you need to, but the next step, we're doubling down on nonsense and creating a button clicker mechanism. These buttons are by far the most infuriating part of this build. It took me a pretty significant amount of time to find all the pieces. Here's the first two that you need. And basically you're going to put this little metal piece inside of this little black piece and then bend the tabs. I will do a close-up in a second. And this is something that the button sort of presses into and the spring presses into to give more of a clicky feel to it. And here we go. You can see the little tabs bent out. You can see it on the inside. You can see the tabs bent out. It is hard to get in, but then pretty easy to bend. So now that we have this piece right here, what else are we talking about for this button? Well, we have a spring, a button, and a bezel. The button is the big red piece. The bezel is the green outer piece. The button nests into the bezel. The spring lives on the inside of the button. And then that little clicker piece will end up snapping to the bezel. So this is the piece we just put together. This is the bezel, button, and spring. And everything snaps together so that the bezel is basically held in by that snap piece that we just created. Confused? Well, that's fine. I'm going to show you what the more completed product looks like here in a second. I would recommend stopping and validating that what you have looks like what I have if you have any confusion, because this was quite the pain. Here we go. Bezel snaps into that black snap piece. Button should be able to be pressed down. Bezel should stay in place, and that is what we're looking for. So with that all put together, we're moving on to the next piece, which is the strap. The straps are held in by a few really seemingly weak pieces, and this first one is held in by this metal rod, and we had to put this metal rod through this clothy plastic piece. So we feed him through like this, and he nests in like this. Again, this is a good point to stop if you have any confusion and take a look at what it should look like. I'm going to assemble it sort of roughly here, and then I'm going to snap it in place and show you exactly where it positions in. Here you go. So this is how it snaps in, and the plastic itself holds that in place, and then you're going to screw the plastic together. So that is the strap. We also have to consider the front. The front needs to be placed in alongside the strap because there are going to be little plastic pieces that come off of it. So button on top, screws go in the bottom, black piece goes in the front, strap goes in the back. So here's those little black pieces that I was referencing that sort of stick in. They are rubber. They're easy and malleable to move around. I would just say that I wouldn't sweat it if these things are popping out on you. You can put these back in once the product is sort of finalized. So get them in place, do yourself a favor and don't leave it exactly to the end. But if you find them popping out, don't worry so much about it. Additionally, we're going to run this bolt through the top. It's going to go through here, and this is what's really holding it together. Again, if I have a complaint, it's that there's basically 2 bolts holding this thing together. So, you can see I fed in those little plastic pieces. The red button is on top, the strap is in the back. This bolt bridges what we just put together from the screen. And next we're going to move on to this little vacuum tube display, which is completely decorative, but it's made up of these 2 little plastic domes. This little black piece that holds those plastic domes, I'm going to say holds, doesn't really hold them, a black nest that it lives in, and a handful of screens that exist around that nest. This is purely decorative. I think it looks really cool, and I think the screen is one of the better done pieces. But one complaint I did have is that all of these have a very stunningly tight fit. So as we assemble this, just keep in mind that getting it to the point I'm showing you right now involved me putting a lot of force on it that made me a little bit nervous as I was going through. But this is sort of the first stage with the faux vacuum tubes in place. And this is the final product with the metal screen over, you can see the tubes, and the black graded piece in the back. Again, required a lot of effort. So next we're going to move on to the Geiger counter piece of it, which is probably the worst piece, and honestly this section took me the most amount of time of any single section. Because there are these 2 side pieces. This requires buttons, this requires sticker appliques, it required this little wrist connector to be put in place, and I had to be super careful because I wanted this little Pip-Boy moniker on there perfectly. So I did get on perfectly. I put my little bolts in. This part wasn't the worst, although my OCD kicked in and it did make it a little more difficult on me. But we were able to put this wrist connector in and the applique pretty easily. Here's the screws I used in case you need them if you have any questions. And this is the step that we're on. We're going to have to use some different screws throughout this process. And this is where all hell breaks loose in this step right here. These buttons are a nightmare. Like the other buttons, they use a bezel, they use an inner button, they use this back piece, and they all snap together. Well, you don't exactly have as much space as the last one because unlike the last one, you're not working from the back, you're working from the side. And you also have these wires. They are kind of a pain. We'll get to them later. I'm less concerned about that. I was more concerned when I started this that they were going to be a pain. And those are the screws I used, by the way. I was much more concerned by the end about the buttons. The buttons really became the bane of my existence. So here is sort of a partial update of the buttons in. You can see from the side, I'm actually going to slow it down here and just show you it for a minute. These buttons just want to pop out. Until they are complete, just be super careful. Here's the wires put on, and I thought this was going to be more difficult, but there's a plastic piece, and then this outer piece, and then these terminal connectors. This was actually staggeringly simple. It was more difficult to just actually find all the pieces than anything else. So, we also had to put 2 on the side. Not a big deal. Again, the buttons on the side were really the biggest nightmare here. This looks like it took 30 seconds. It took me a good hour to get this section done because I kept blowing the spring for these buttons across my house. So let's move on to the radio, and this is, I guess, another point of contention for me with this product. It uses this rubber band system that I'll show you a little later on. It is suboptimal. I'm going to say suboptimal. It's probably the nicest way to say it. The rubber band doesn't like to seat in place. There's a lot of mechanisms going on here. It's kind of silly how much actually is going on to make this thing move. You have the dial, a button, you have a plastic screen that goes over it that looks sort of like glass. You have the piece that they don't sort of nest into. I have the button already on here. And all of these pieces have to fit together appropriately so that a drive will actually force this thing to go. This is the basically final product right here, and as you can see, there's a whole bunch of pins holding this gear in place. I recommend just slowing this way down if you have any questions, but this drive does not necessarily do the best job. So just be patient. That's the best recommendation I can give. Rubber meets the road in this next step where we're actually assembling all the pieces together. Again, this screw number 82 and bolt number 83 are fundamentally holding this bottom piece together, and I have some issue with that because really the only thing holding it on is that. So here's another point where I can give you a tip. I'm going to pause right here and really just hone in on this. These wires are incredibly difficult to work with. Staggeringly difficult to work with. Do not get frustrated by these wires. Try whatever you need to do to get them to seat, but consider swapping the red and the blue where the directions tell you to go in. So it actually wants you to put the blue on top and the red on the bottom. One thing I did that made it a lot easier is I took the red and put it on top and the blue on the bottom. Just the way it seats, it works out very well. So with that done, what we see here is that the top also needs a little bit more attention to finish it up. Once the end cap is on it, we have to slide in the bottom, in the center, and it sort of all holds itself together. So again, here's where my general complaint comes in. This mechanism of the bottom is really held in by one screw, and that unnerves me somewhat. But as you can see here, it is only one bolt that's sort of threaded in and one screw. So yeah, I mean, it is what it is. So we also see that there's some decal work that has to be done, and having to route some wires and this centerpiece in. It starts to look very good at this point, although obviously you still got a little ways to go. So the little ways to go here is just sort of decorations that sort of round out the side. We have a speaker cover. We have the whole radio mechanism that we put together. We have a bendy wire and a knob that goes up top. From what I can see, this can be completed in any order. But let me just quickly run through all the pieces that you're going to want to locate out of the kit at this stage. You're going to want to locate the little speaker, the speaker grate, the radio you put together, this little pulley thing down the bottom, some screws, and then this little side piece that goes up top. So as you can see, this slides in real easy. Again, you've already assembled the whole thing, so you're just slotting it into place. And then affixing it with some screws and a bolt. My bolt didn't quite fit in quite right, so I had to find another nut to put on there, but it still looks pretty mint. And you can see the little speaker slots in there, and the little speaker grate goes over that for the radio. Again, only held in by screws, so no big deal there. Screws are in, and it looks pretty good. Definitely different from the front picture, though, because it seems to make it look a lot more silver. Where we're at now is essentially having to look at the top and center to finish them off. So, this is that little side piece I referenced. It's got a little notch in it, and it seats right here. You're then able to put through this little windy dial, and that sort of holds the whole thing together. So, no screws in this section, but it does make a really satisfying turning motion. There's also the bolt and then a couple screw holes you're just going to fill in. And once you get that, you're done. You're good. Moving on to the next section. So in the next section, you're going to throw on this little windy dial to the bottom of the radio and to the side of the holotape player. Nothing too amazing here, but it's starting to look very good. So moving on to the cuffs, this is really, really simple. I almost don't need to go through a video of assembling this because anybody tackling this is going to be able to do this no problem. Basically, these little black brackets that seat in, and you have to put them into the back of the holotape player. Then they got these little two brackets. One of them is a threaded receiver, one of them is a threaded screw, and these hold the smaller cuff in place using these two little gray brackets you installed a long time ago. This is a little bit of a pain in that it's hard to get the receiving screw in place and line it up. Otherwise, it's basically just an investment of time at this point. Put my light on here so you can very clearly see the screws where they sort of sit in regards to the smaller cuff. And you can sort of see from that angle how it sort of lines up. Once completed, you basically have 4 screws holding in just this little band, which feels very appropriate, and it doesn't feel chintzy at all, which is quite impressive. So the next section we have is basically finishing off the latching mechanism, and I gotta say, latching mechanism does not overly impress me. Basically, you're gonna find these metal latch pieces that are referenced right here, these little quick snap pieces, some pins and some springs and a couple of screws to hold it all together. So this is the easiest piece because basically you pull out the moving piece in between, install a spring, pin it in place, and you're good to go. Once complete, your button should be able to be depressed up or down, and that should allow you to manipulate the button, the little button catch on the inside. This is what's going to hold together a lot of your things, so definitely make sure that you have it appropriate. Spring goes here. The little metal dimple piece goes here. And then you pin it in place. So finally we have to attach basically everything we've just put together to straps. Again, not difficult, maybe a smidge time consuming and also difficult to find all the pieces. We need this piece of cross metal. We need this silver piece right here that the strap will go into. And we need these little catches, and they're all going to get assembled together with some screws, referenced here. Good to go. So here's me showing what the bar looks like when placed through. Here's the bar once you feed the bar plus the strap through that little metal piece. And here's how these little quick releases snap to the side. So I have sort of seated them in place. You can see the 2 hex screws go in there. Good to go. The last piece is the least impressive piece of this, and this is his latching mechanism. Basically, it's using some sort of tension based on this vacuum-formed piece to hold everything in place using this sort of latch. The strap goes in, the latch goes down, and that's supposed to hold everything in place. I have not had great results with this thus far, and hopefully I can find a better way to make this work. Because the strap just wants to come out, which is understandable. This is not exactly, metal on metal here we're talking about. It's plastic held together with 4 screws. Once installed, you have yourself your Pip-Boy. So the buttons at this point all work. They don't slide around. It's not overly concerning. And you're able to manipulate anything that you damn well please, including the holotape. Which is cute and fun, and made me very happy. You can see vaguely my reflection, reflection in that screen. Hello everyone, hello world, this is my chintzy face reveal. So altogether, this is a wonderful product. It is very well made. You can tell it was made in a caring fashion. You can tell that it was not sloppily thrown together. It is not Bethesda's attempt at the power armor bag, where it is just sort of chintzy and awful looking. Each one of these pieces is very clearly been thought through, been catted, been cammed, and injection molded in a way that makes the thing look even better. The box itself is wonderful. At $100 and I think it's $50 is what it would normally retail for on ThinkGeek. I'd say it's okay value if you're a tremendous fan of the series and you're into this sort of collecting of statues or replica objects. If you're not a tremendous fan of the Fallout series, I would wait for it to go on sale. as a piece to accentuate cosplay. I think this is a wonderful item. It looks great sort of sitting in my shelf. It looks great sitting in the box with the cover up. I think that there's opportunity potentially to mod it yourself a little bit to make it look perhaps a little bit more used and a little bit more worn. And I'll be interested to see what the community does with it, over time, because it is a wonderful little product that looks great. Looks really good. So if I were to rank it on a scale of sort of the 1 to 10 system of value, I'd give it about an 8, which, it's still in the passable range. It's not the cheapest product ever, but you're definitely getting value for it. What I would like to see is them to address some of the issues that I found with the side. Being held together with one screw is just wholly unacceptable. If you wear this, if it bumps into something, it's very, 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 very possible you're going to break that lower radio piece. And if you think about it, you're holding onto that dial and turning it in order to manipulate the radio dial. You are almost certainly going to damage something with that radio dial. Additionally, I would like to see the directions improved because the directions are substandard. One of the reasons I made this video is I'm hoping that you, as consumers, will be better positioned to assemble it with a video like this out there. Lastly, and I think least importantly, I'm going to say, I'd like to see the strap improved. I understand that everyone's arm is a different size, so it sort of has to solve for everybody. I'm a pretty hefty person, and the strap was just not getting it done. It slides up and down my arm. I'm thinking what I'm going to end up doing is getting essentially an inflatable cuff and inflating the cuff a little bit to hold it in place. If I do so and I have success, I'll post a little follow-up. So, all in all, great product. Again, thank you very much for watching. If this is something that you've purchased, drop in the comments below and let me know what you think. If it's something you think about purchasing, if you have any questions, drop a comment below, and I'll see what I can do to help you out. Thank you so much for watching. As always with my videos, have a great night.